Hi, everyone. I'm here in Sydney, Australia with Scripter. Scripter is a YouTuber, an author, and an economist. And since I happen to be traveling to Sydney, I thought we could have a chat.
Hey, everyone.
So we're planning to talk today in 3 parts: an introduction, AI in China, and the future of AI. We'll start with part 1, which is an introduction to Scripter. And tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, hey, some of you may know me as a scripter. I'm a YouTuber, and well, most of people know me as a YouTuber. But my main specialization, what I do in real life, is I'm a behavioral economist. It's a very strange science, and not many people know about it. Well, I got into this after I graduated from Columbia University, where before that I was like just a pure economist. And then at Columbia University, I got converted into behavioral economics, which is a sub-branch of economics. And an interesting part about it, if you ask me, behavioral economics is probably the most interesting science in the world. The way how to think about it is behavioral economics is a science about how we decide and why we decide to do what we do.
As humans.
And you can think of it this way. It's basically a science about the software that we are running on, like the software that runs us. And that's science about that software. We, like humans, we are the most complex mechanisms in the known universe. And this is a science about how these most complex organisms in the known universe make decisions. It is endlessly fascinating. I've been doing this for about 20 years now, and it's just totally awesome. So that's a part of me. That's one half of me. And the second half of me is AI. I got converted into AI about in 2017 when I was a Forbes columnist in China. At some of the events, there was Jack Ma presenting his ideas, and he was just repeating one thing again and again: AI, AI, AI. The future is AI. And that was 2017, like way before most of people even heard that word for the first time. And that's where I realized that basically AI is becoming a part of us, and it's kind of merging with my field as well. And that's where, since then, I've been basically doing these two things together: behavioral economics and AI. So this is to my fields.
Because Scripter actually spent, 5 years, like quite a number of years?
Yeah, I'm basically, China is my another professional field I've been researching. And I lived in China for 5 years as a Forbes columnist, but also was focused on China before that as well. So I kind of can pretend that I speak Chinese, but don't tell anybody.
He's going to move to Taiwan, apparently. So I think that's more Chinese than I know. So anyway, because you have a lot of experience with China, we're going to spend a big part of our video talking about the impact of AI in China. So I'm looking forward to that. And you talked a little bit about your YouTube channel. I think that probably many of our viewers are familiar with you. If not, of course, I'd always check out the link over here somewhere to Scripter's YouTube channel. So we talked about those, but there's a third category, which is that you are a sci-fi author. So
that's what they say, yes.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, so it's basically the interesting thing about being a behavioral economist is that at some point you realize that if you publish the results of whatever of work that you do, if you publish as an article, like in peer-reviewed article, magazine or something, you're probably going to have like 5.5 readers, and that's it. So it just became clear that if you really, the best way of publishing your work is actually to publish it as a sci-fi book. And then another thing is actually, since the topic, this entire behavioral economics kind of applies that humans are not perfect sometimes, and you actually find yourself at the edge of political correctness sometimes. So it's kind of not very, it is not a very academic friendly type of area. So it's kind of controversial area. So the best way to actually make your results known is a science fiction book. So this is how that was initial idea, how it started. And then it just rolled and rolled. And an interesting thing about me as a book writer, it's probably everybody already tired about that. I mean, hearing about me talking about myself, but well, that's a professional problem of all writers. We can talk forever about ourselves. But the thing is, the book, in my case, usually is the way how writers usually do. They just publish one book, then scrap it, next one, and that's how they improve. They just make, each time they write a new story. In my case, I rewrite the same story. I have just one story, and I rewrite it and rewrite it and rewrite it, and that's what I've been doing for more than 10 years now. And last week I published, finally it's done. It's a historical moment, and the book is ready. And so basically it's a enormously important moment for me. I think the book is not as bad as it used to be. It's almost readable. So yes, it's ready. It's finally out to the world.
So you can read it if you understand Russian, right?
Yes, it's a minor requirement. Because it's just a few initial editions. I actually was writing it in English, and then what I learned is no matter how many and how good your editors are, it never actually get to the level where it is what you want it to be. So the only way to write a fiction book is actually to write it in your native language, which is Russian. So nobody's perfect. So it is. Last week it was completed in Russian. And what we currently do is we're translating. Next step is to translate it in English, and that's we're starting a Kickstarter. I started a Kickstarter campaign this week, and objective of to translate the book into proper using a professional editor, and basically to have that thing out in English. And so that's where we're at.
Yes, and talking to Scripter makes you feel a bit like I'm talking to Isaac Asimov, because if anyone knows the Foundation series, there's a character, I think Harry Sheldon is the name of the character, who basically is a psychologist of future psychology or something like that, and he's able to predict the actions of groups of people, and he predicts the future of his empire and so on up to like hundreds of years into the future. And it's all about, he can predict the actions of groups of people, but not individuals, because individuals vary too much.
Yeah. But groups on average are very consistent, yeah?
Exactly. So this is the real life version, as far as I can tell.
I don't like Asimov, but
well, not an Asimov.
But actually, you never ask one author, one writer about another writer. There's like it's always like a holy war. Yeah.
It's your favorite, unless it's your hero. Right?
Yeah, true.
So thanks for coming here today, Scripter, and for setting up all this lighting. You guys can't see it, but this is a very fancy setup compared to my normal setup. So thanks.
It's Australia. It's just we like sun. It's like it's lots of light.
Everybody here, they care about light.
Yeah.
So like I said, thanks for joining me. And I have two main questions for you today. One is about how AI will impact China and other countries that are currently developing AI. And the second is a follow-on is how will AI impact the world, economically speaking, because you are an economist by background and you've spent time in China and obviously studied a lot of group economics. So that will be the remainder of the video. So part 2 is AI in China from a group perspective. You want to start there? Or?
Yeah, so basically, as I mentioned before, my specialization, I have quite a narrow niche in behavioral economics, which is a behavioral economics in groups. And the reason for this is just turns out that groups also behave very differently. And so it's a lot of science behind how groups behave. And for that purpose, I went to China to do the research in group behavior, and I spent 5 years doing that research. And that was basically in parallel with Forbes, being a columnist at Forbes. And I visited about 200 cities in China just with one purpose of observing how ultra-concentrated groups behave and basically doing research and getting the insights, how groups in different environments and different settings, what kind of pattern we can get out of it. And then gradually it became clear that one of the major factors that begins to get into this equation is AI. Just previously, the way how human groups were managing themselves before AI was fairly straightforward. It was like hierarchy structures where...
It used to be the default in so many settings, like in companies, in governments.
Yeah, you just look at any group of people, large group of people, you almost inevitably will find a hierarchy structure. And that's like a pyramid. And that is, but do you know how that happened? There is a theory. So we humans, we were formed most of our evolutionary time as hunter-gatherers. So out of a million of years of our evolving us as a species, almost 99.9%, we have been hunters and gatherers. And that means that we were running in savanna-ish, and we were hunting and gathering. And we always were in the groups of somewhere between 20 to 30 people. We just simply could not remember names of more people, not remember more names of, just that was a maximum amount of people that could survive in a group of hunter-gatherers. And that's how our brain evolved. Our brain evolved to remember, to be a part of a group of about 20 to 30 people.
I've heard the number put at 100 or 150. Does that come later in the stage of human?
Well, the thing is that if you look at the most typical groups around, for example, here we're in a university, and in the universities, the undergrad classes, they somewhere usually around 30 to 50 people. The same with in the army, the units is about 30 to 50 people. The reason for this is that this is a manageable group. If you make it bigger, it becomes dysfunctional. And so that's a fundamental feature of our brain, because we simply cannot operate effective in larger groups. So that's how it works. And then if you grow this number of people, the way how it works is that you always add each group of 30 people has one boss, and then you create, once you grow big enough, you create a group of these bosses, and it also can be only about 30 people. And then if you grow more than that, more bosses than that, you build on top of them another boss, and that's how the pyramid works. Basically, that's how hierarchies work. If you look at any company, you get associate, then consultant, then manager, senior manager, layer above. So each time this complexity grows, number of people grow, just add another layer of complexity. So that's how we traditionally work. And that's how we've been worked since Mesopotamia time, like 3,000, 4,000 years ago. And since then, that's how our groups organize themselves.
So where did the 150 people come from? Is that like the maximum?
I don't know. I never heard the number.
I heard that the maximum size of a tribe could be 150 people. Maybe that's like the maximum number of names you can remember, faces you can remember.
I spoke to anthropologists. I have a few friends anthropologists who actually lived with non-contact tribes, 30 to 50 max. They simply cannot feed more. It's just they don't have enough food. They cannot, even in Amazonia level, area where it's very lots of food, still they cannot sustain more than 50 people. So I'm not sure about that, but basically I have first-hand information, literally from second-hand from these tribes.
I think what I'm remembering now is that you can recognize and remember the faces of 150 people. So if you try to make a group more than 150 people, you don't even know if someone is...
At Columbia University, we had a class of 70. I barely remember half of them. No offense, guys.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. So you went to China to study groups of people?
Yes,
maximum.
to run research, yes. And China is unique, as you probably heard. It's a lot of people, and it's very concentrated environment. Introduction of AI into this concentrated groups of people, it actually changes the dynamic and how these groups self-manage. Because the general idea is that almost every society that we know, every group of people, starting from companies to governments, hierarchies, vertical hierarchies. But what AI does, if you look at it, AI makes it possible to have a communication one-on-one with basically the top leader. So all these layers are becoming unnecessary. It is a flattening of that vertical structure, and it is changing it's not just about China, it's pretty much everything around us. All these vertical things that you look around, all structures that we see around us, they are being questioned by the existence of AI.
Meaning like one AI can effectively act as the boss or touch point for essentially unbounded number of people. It's not limited.
Yeah, there is no need anymore for these 30 people groups, first. Second, there is no need to intermediate levels. And that's completely, basically, the whole profession of the middle manager, it just becomes unnecessary. It's a flattening of this entire structure. You can think of it as if previously we were organizing ourselves in vertical structures, and now it's like a matrix where you just have a one-dimensional or maybe two-dimensional layer, and there is no need for the third dimension anymore.
Interesting. What effect will this have in China? Because you came to this realization or whatever while you were studying China.
A little bit, but it's not just China. It's pretty much every group of people will get affected, but it will affect. Well, let's call it not just China. Let's call it East and West.
So, what makes a group different from an individual, like an interaction with a group versus an interaction with an individual?
Well, people in groups behave differently, very differently. And there are so many ways how a group affects the way how individual people make decisions. And probably the easiest example, the easiest to explain example, most obvious and each one of us can relate to, is so-called common denominator effect. The way how it works is that, and each one of us experiences many times, so the way how it works is that when you talk to somebody one-on-one, you usually have multiple interesting topics to discuss. You can talk about this, about that. It's like almost not unlimited, but I would say 10 topics you can discuss, and you're both interested about that. But then suddenly another guy joins, like now it's 3 of you, and you still can talk, find interesting topics. But then one more person joins you, and there are 4 of you now, like a miracle. You find that the only thing you talk about is like weather, sports, cars, politics, women or men or whatever, and that's it. So it's a common denominator effect. The reason why this is happening is that with adding each extra person, the number of commonly shared interesting topics decreases dramatically. It's like when you add one extra number, the number of common denominators shrinks dramatically. So it is actually a fundamental principle, and it works. People in group suddenly begin to behave very differently. It's a fundamental thing what people can talk to about, right? Suddenly it gets degraded. The level of your conversation, it gets degraded tremendously just by adding one person. That's kind of the simplest example. And overall, in group behavioral economics, there are like maybe even hundreds of rules like this, how group behaves in a way that to us, to individuals, seems sometimes unconventional. It's like hidden from us. We do not, most often we do not understand how group works. And that's what I do, basically. That's what I research, is how this group behaves and how you actually can influence this. Like, what's the proper way of making the group behave in the way you want the group to behave.
I guess a lot of the times the lowest common denominator is not just like the topic of conversation, but like how you act, or in the case of economics, what you buy or what you invest in and things like that. Is that kind of where you go?
Yeah, that's one of the simplest way of saying this. For example, what people buy. If somebody lives on an isolated island, nobody around, you probably wouldn't expect that person to buy a Gucci bag or a fancy car, right? But you add more people around, and suddenly people begin to care what other people think about them, and that's the whole luxury retail industry pops up. No offense to anyone, if any one of us is in luxury retail business, but basically the entire industry is based on just one factor, that people begin to care about what group think about them. And interestingly, this specific luxury thing is actually starts at the level where group grow to the level where they have a head of a tribal boss of a tribe. And this to show who's the boss here, that boss begins to wear some strange feather and all this sorts of, as a lion head, or by the way, see who is the boss here. So this is how it works. And again, it's a group. Group makes you behave this way. In most cases, you never even thought about it.
I've actually heard that the luxury industry is really big in China. Like,
it's exactly for that reason. The way how it works in China is that people really want to, because it's so concentrated society, it's actually, in the concentrated society, it's extremely important what others think about you. And people, it's basically kind of one of the purpose in life is just to show your status. And luxury goods is the easiest way of showing the status.
right. So you were talking about China as a really concentrated society, and I'm sure that led to all kinds of interesting anthropomorphic or economic differences with other countries you might have lived in. So tell us about the economics or the politics or whatever of China specifically.
Talking about the politics about China. Yeah. So, yes, I lived in 7 countries altogether with very different ways of groups of self-organizing.
How many languages do you speak, by the way?
I can pretend that I speak 5 languages, but
Okay.
yes.
As far as everything else.
Yeah, it just came somehow naturally, except Chinese. Chinese came very unnaturally. More than a decade of very painful experience. Don't learn Chinese unless you really need to. Yeah, so I lived in 7 countries, and one of the reasons is just to have a big enough comparison basis so you can see how groups behave in different environments. China is obviously a very an extreme example and very interesting one. And impact of AI on how it's going to affect China, if we compare it how it's going to affect the Western world, I think it's going to be very dramatically different. First of all, it's going to affect the Western world a lot. As we just mentioned, AI is removing vertical structures. You can think of AI as like a bulldozer, just running. It's like a stray bulldozer. It destroys every vertical structure just because vertical structures they're not needed anymore. And the West so we're going to have it in the West, and it's going to change the landscape, like a landscape designer on the loose bulldozer. And so it's going to change our landscape quite a lot. But the West is more or less the way how the Western structures work. They kind of ready to, they're more fit to adapt to this type of environments, because in the West people kind of tend to self-organize. People tend to build structures, self-organize themselves.
In the groups of less than 50.
In the groups less than 50, yes. Otherwise, you can see again these Babylon towers growing here and there. But basically, there is some self-organization. It's if you put it this way, in words of Walt Whitman, the Western civilization, it has some self-organization force in it. It's like resist much, obey little. So this is how the Western world works. And this type of environment where each individual is carrying this kind of message in himself, like, okay, resist to external forces and obey very little. So this type of societies with a predominant cultural DNA raised on Walt Whitman wisdom, they kind of self-organizing. They can live. My intuition tells me they naturally they equipped to live in flat structures where there is no pyramid. They actually might be feeling more comfortable.
It might be more comfortable. Like the strongest version of that I can think of is like a libertarian perspective, right? Where they just don't want government, they just don't want any structures.
Yeah. But basically, I think the point here is that there is kind of self-managing, self-organizing force that people know how to self-organize. China is a different story. China traditionally is very hierarchy level, naturally hierarchy level building society where not everybody, the majority of people are expected to be managed from above. The whole way how society works is that you need a manager, you need like a shepherd. And again, this is normal. This is nothing wrong about it. It's just another way of how groups of people do self-organization. and it works brilliantly, past tense. But now AI bulldozer come in, and then all of a sudden it turns out that what AI can do and is doing naturally is the same thing that CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, is doing. It basically becomes a direct competitor with Communist Party. And that opens the question, like, how is the future going to look like for that type of groups, where, in words of Walt Whitman, you obey much, resist little. And that's an open question, and that's a topic of further research, and lots of research can come out of it.
Yeah, in a sense, the AI system is empowering people to be more independent. Like right now, you can have startups created by one person because they can just ask the AI to help them write the code or help them do the marketing or that kind of thing. And so if your society is already structured with some of that expectation in it, then you're going to have an easier transition. But if you're from, like you're saying, an Eastern culture where like you're supposed to pay attention to your elders and like find a good job and stay there for life, if you're in Japan a few decades ago.
Or in Germany.
Germany?
Same way.
Is it?
Yeah. When I was graduating, just as a side note, when I was graduated from Humboldt University, one of the things that struck me is that when everybody were just getting job, you know what my classmates were, like German classmates, were all talking about when they were getting offers? Retirement packages was the main topic of, that's how you're like, oh, it's like so much better retirement.
I think this is my first job because it has a better retirement package.
It's not a joke. And I was like, mentally thinking like, hey guys, what about that thing in the middle? Like that little, like, come on, like boring, come on, that's not important. No, seriously. So that's just my 2 cents.
Interesting. In a country, I guess the government is the ultimate source of like force, authority, right? Like they have the police force, they have everything else to create a civilized environment for everybody to exist in. So that's good. But if some of the powers of governments are being challenged by AI, where does that leave us, especially in China, where it sounds like the government and AI is going to have a complicated interaction?
Yeah, that's right. So basically the question is, if the society gets used to an idea that it is managed by an external force, and well, in this case, external force meaning
higher force,
and it's an expectation that, all right, we're all being managed by the higher force. And then appears another higher force that is capable of doing exactly this, but at 1/100th of resources. The question is, what's going to happen? And again, this is not just about East, not just about China. It's exactly the same thing is about to happen in the West. Just the West is, something tells me, that kind of will be probably more naturally, the West is more designed for this type of environments, while the East, it seems like it's going to be more foreign concept for East.
Do you think the Chinese AI is actually going to be able to do this? Because we know that, like, you know, they censor some of the training data and all. I mean, they have amazing capability, but they are taking steps to censor and regulate that maybe the West isn't right now.
If you ask me, I think this is probably the most important thing that is about to happen, that will be happening in the next decade, is the divergent path of Western AI and Eastern AI. They're going to be most likely evolving in different directions. And the main reason for this, as you mentioned, is because of sort of information available for AI. Well, Western information, more or less uncensored, more or less. In the East, information is very regulated. It's just amazing. When I lived in China, it actually feels like, when you spend a lot of time there without going outside, feels like you live in a completely different universe. What information you consume there and what information you receive just crossing the border is vastly different worlds. And so AI that is trained on that, like a bubble, well, you probably can call it like a bubble information that artificially created. So that AI will have very different biases versus the AI that has like the vast access to vast amount of uncensored, unbiased information. The question is, which AI model will be, which AI paradigm will be more evolutionary sustainable, like stronger. Because again, it's evolution. These systems, they will compete. And another important questions coming out of it is that will these two AI systems, let's just for simplicity say it's going to be like Western AI and Eastern AI, so like just two entities, are they going to talk to each other?
I'm sure they will.
100%. And then the question is, how's this, like, what's going to happen on that border when they talk to each other? Are they going to persuade each other in? So how this two drastically different AI minds, and by the way, this AI minds definitely going to be smarter than we are, because they will be to some extent almost like independent. How are they going to communicate to each other? And do we really think that humans will be able to censorship that second AI? Because that AI will be smarter than they are. So if you think of, it probably sounds a little bit futuristic, right? Well, I'm a science fiction writer, so that's what I'm supposed to do. But the question is like, how are they going to communicate to each other and what's going to happen? Yeah. If we think that it's a long-term future, like, we will figure out, it's a nice concept, we'll figure out it later. We're talking about a few years from now.
Yes, I mean, you say you're a science fiction writer, but I'm an AI safety researcher, right? So it's also my job to think about those and then say, this could happen in a bad way. Let's plan for it and think about it.
One way or another, it's definitely going to be boring.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so if you ask my opinion, where the action will be happening and the most interesting things will be happening in the world of AI in the next decade, that will be it. The Eastern AI versus Western AI. And it's an open question. I don't think we're equipped right now. We know all these unknowns in this very complex equation, but this is enormously interesting topic.
I think that's a good point for us to move on to an even broader discussion about AI. So this can be part 3, the future of AI.
Yo.
So we talked a bit about the Eastern AI and how it will look in China. And I'm very curious how it will look, in the world as a whole, or maybe a few steps further into the future, if you can see that far. Do you have any thoughts?
I think one of the most profound things that is happening, other than East and West confrontation, AI confrontation, is actually a conversion of AI into, let's call it this way, Cambrian explosion of AI, which is what we are about to witness. So what is happening until very recent, until last year, almost all AI models that we've used were like singular models. It's basically the neural, like deep learning network that is just self-contained inside, and so you just throw information into, like, inputs into the model, and it just throws out like an output.
Yeah, like a single neural network, essentially. Like GPT-4 was one of the first, I think, to be mixture of experts. So there they have like 7 independent models that are kind of experts at different things. But even that is kind of all together, like all the experts feed together into one model in the end. So I guess you're talking about like non-modular neural networks.
Yeah, and what happens then is they figured out how to make those models talk to each other. Although we don't know that very for sure, because OpenAI is kind of secretive about what's going on happening under the hood, but there are indications that one of the main breakthroughs that is happening with OpenAI, starting with O1 model, what they call reasoning models and train of thought. The way why it works is that because they actually merge together multiple individual models, and these models are now talk to each other directly, and they communicate, and they work as together on whatever the task is. Some people call it agentic model, but if you ask me, I would call it a multicellular organism. It's basically, we're building, starting from last year, 24, we are, first time in history, we're building multicellular AI organisms. And if we look at the history of what happened with organic life on this planet, the last time when individual cells learned how to build groups together and start forming multicellular organisms. The next thing, almost immediately what happened, just within 100 million years, was Cambrian explosion. And that is, I don't know if you probably remember from the biology class, a Cambrian explosion is when it was like boom.
Yeah, the number of species on the planet just exploded. And if you look at like the Burgess Shale, for example, they've captured lots of fossils of some of the animals.
Yeah, and before it was like nothing, nothing, nothing. And then like entire zoo walks in.
Yes.
So, and that's what's about to happen with AI. So currently we have like O1 model and that's pretty much it, right? Or maybe a few others you can name. But it's like that nothing, nothing, nothing right now. And then what we're about to see and what is happening is that they start putting these models in all thinkable and unthinkable combinations. And it's going to be an explosion of different type of AI organisms that will be living out there, competing with each other, building niches for each other. And that's probably, so basically we're about to see Cambrian explosion.
So as cells start to act together, they can specialize, right? Which is what enables a multicellular organism to do so many more things than a single cell organism can. So you can have legs, you can have fins, you can have eyes.
You can have neural system separate. Just think one of the way how to think about it. For example, just imagine a neural network where each neuron is a separate LLM model. How about that? So you have like you can already build it. You can build a neural network where each neuron is itself is a neural network. Think how crazy that can be, and what kind of things that just completely new. Basically, you build a neural tissue that forms brain, and these cells can specialize in gazillion different ways. And what kind of structures you can build from it is so that's one thing. And then another thing is actually this is where it becomes of practical interest. These cells, they have to communicate to each other, and they have to exchange resources, funds. And just imagine there are two AI cells, they talk to each other, and if they want to exchange resources, how are they going to do it? Cryptocurrency. This is going to be, it's almost certainty, is that the main user of cryptocurrencies will be AI models. This is how they're going to exchange resources between themselves.
You're going to integrate into an ecosystem of other AI agents and like, hey, I can do this service if you give me some cryptocurrency. Here you go. I do this really well.
Yeah, that's the future of cryptocurrencies.
Yeah. But if you think about like even inside one multicellular organism, because that's kind of like a global network of multicellular organisms, but inside one, you get a lot of advantage out of the specialization. So a lot of people have said that AGI would probably consist of a lot of different heterogeneous models. Like you need different types of models to do spatial reasoning compared with like language, compared with whatever else. And some of those modules might not even be neural networks, right? They could be other algorithms. And the same way you said that you could take a neuron and replace it with a neural network, right? Like there's a lot of abstraction that can happen here. So you can go as deep as you want in terms of the sub-networks, the subcomponents to do different types of tasks. And like everything neural network related, you can either construct it manually. You can say, hey, you are the neural network that specializes in this. And that's where you have to start. That's how they made, GPT-4, for example, I believe. And that's how the vision of AGI that I just described would be constructed. But eventually, the models themselves just figure out how they should, what activity they should do best, right? Well, that's where you really get the ecosystem where they start evolving and they start saying, actually, I'm just going to take on this responsibility because I can do it best and I'm positioned well for it and so on.
Here, if we look at the way how the nature is doing this, it is actually, nature, for whatever reason, is actually prefers to give a role to each individual cells and say, all right, from now on, you're doing this. It's like the concept of stem cells. Stem cell is a universal cell, just a blank cell, and it's like screams like, tell me what to do. I'm going to be anything. So you take a stem cell, and depending on whatever the signal you send it can become a nerve cell, or it can become blood cell, or pretty much anything.
If I remember correctly, I think there's only about 200 types of cells in the human body.
Just neurons are like they
find categories of cells.
They like if broadly, yeah, but just neurons, they like almost endless number of parts.
There are tons of small variations, but my point there is like, suppose a human designer created 200 types of networks, right? And then they kind of just throw that in there, and now you can start getting variations from there and so on. So you can still have like some amount of human input or designer input into it, and then allow the chaos of evolution to take place.
Pretty much so. So that's one of the practical implications, because I think we're all practical people, and we ask a question, so what? And the answer is, well, crypto. This is how the main user of crypto is not going to be human. It's going to be AI. And and again, this is not a decade from now, this is years from now.
I don't know if you see, there was someone who tweeted as talking about people being worried about AI models, the safety of AI models. And they're like, the last category was, this AI escaped from its confines and it went on the internet and it started mining crypto and it has hundreds of thousands of dollars of income. And then
it was like that joke about the smart home. What is a smart home? Real smart home is a home that when the master is not at home is mining crypto. Yeah, so that's
exactly. So that's kind of the end game from, of course, like if you have an AI that has goals that are reasonably like intelligible to us, right? That's probably what you would do as a person, right? You'd be like, okay, here's this world out here. Should I go and wreck it and destroy it, or maybe I could just go find a corner and mine cryptocurrency, right? And then get whatever you want in the future. So it's kind of interesting thought experiment. So as an economist, you must have some unique perspectives on this too, right? Like I talk to a lot of technical people or AI safety people, and we think about technical scenarios that can happen. And you gave a very cool perspective on like, what an Eastern AI would look like versus other perspectives and things. But to focus on the core economics perspective, I've heard that the economy can be broken down into labor, capital, and technology. So, what happens to those three factors, or however you want to talk about it, if AI starts really...
It's like those three elephants the entire world stands on. Elephants.
Three elephants?
Of the world, the three main driving forces, fundamental forces behind, any economy is labor, capital, and, you can call it technology. I like to call it intelligence. The three main, pretty much everything else boils down to this three, about the human societies, boils down to three fundamental forces, labor, capital, and intelligence. And the question is, what AI is doing to this? And we can start with labor. Labor is an interesting thing. We probably all know that what is happening right now is the end of the knowledge-based economy, where previously pretty much what people were doing, we all were doing, we were spending first half of our life learning information in the universities, and then the rest of the life we were spending selling this information. Like lawyers, for example, first 20 years you spend, 10 years you spend learning the stuff, the craft, and then you consult your clients and you sell your information. Well, huge simplification, of course. But if you boil it down, pretty much all the white-collar jobs were like this.
The most beneficial jobs for humans to do are the ones that use our brains a lot, right? That rely on intelligence and not information, essentially. And those are seen historically as the most desirable jobs. But now those are also the easiest for AI to do.
Yeah, and also if you look at those professions, almost all of them were vertical pyramids. I personally worked as a consultant with about 100 companies over 6 countries and 4 continents. And I'm seeing this. It's almost always a hierarchy of white-collar jobs, and they pretty much all gone very soon. So they actually, I'm being asked quite often, like, let's say you are 15 years old and you're thinking where to go, where do you go? What profession do you take? And the answer is, I don't know. I was trying to figure out, like, what is a single profession, mass profession, that is going to be remain relevant in the future. And the only things that and I had a separate video about this, and the only thing that I came up with is actually AI cybersecurity, which is Dr. Wackel is good at. But I think, again, so this is a major transformation in terms of labor. The whole concept of labor changes. And then it's not just white collars, drivers. Driverless cars are out there already. So very soon, there are going to be first roads that will not allow human drivers on them.
Yeah, they cause more accidents.
Yes. Just think about it. And how many drivers you know? A lot. I mean, I don't know, but a lot. There are millions of drivers. And, well, it's actually hard to find a profession where humans remain relevant. What it means is that labor, the importance of labor, is obviously in this equation of three fundamental forces, is obviously becomes much less important. And so labor is out of this equation. I think it's fairly safe to say. And then the next question is, all right, so does it mean that we just want to invest in our future and all become providers not of labor, but of capital? And it's a good question. And at first, it feels like it's a safe thing to do. You own shares, stock market booms, and everything is fine, and you buy an apartments, real estate, and that's your strategy for survival, which is sensible strategy, unless you consider one minor fact. That is, the main purpose of capital is to transfer labor through time. That's pretty much what it does. Capital is when you're young, you work, you save a little bit, and you invest, and then you use that to make other people work for you when you're old. Transfer of labor through time.
You borrow money to buy a house, and you're kind of borrowing against your future efforts to afford a house now, that kind of thing.
Yeah, but the fundamental is still the same. You transfer labor through time, and that's what capital is for. What's going to happen to this when labor is no longer needed? So what exactly you're going to be transferring?
Sheets of paper with numbers written on them?
It's an open question. Well, there is an opinion is that capital will be transferring intelligence through time, which might be a good story, and it's probably the story has legs because, well, intelligence need hardware and need energy and everything else, and just to kind of facilitate all that, that's where the capital will be used. And let's not forget about those little individual AI cells that will talk to each other and exchange resources, exchange cryptocurrencies. It's also kind of capital. So they kind of exchange intelligence to some extent and transfer it through time. But it's an open question. How's it going to look like? And but the most importantly is if you look at capital, and then you ask yourself a question like, how is it going to be that split between capitals that transfers labor and that capital that transfers intelligence? And if you ask my opinion, I think it's going to be about 99% of the capital currently is related to labor. And only a very tiny fraction of capital is actually related to intelligence. And here's everybody going to say, hey, come on, like look at the top 5 tech companies, which we all know, and let's not call their names in vain. But one of them that we all know very well when we want to search for something, right? And when we want to learn some new information, we go there and research that information. And then turns out that actually ChatGPT is doing exactly that much better. I use ChatGPT personally a lot now this last few months. I don't remember when I was using Google search, just between us. And people, we may all ask like, hey, how's it so, like, what does it mean? Just imagine this. When cell phones were invented, all of a sudden what happened is that it turned out that they kind of eliminated an entire spectrum of different services that previously were covered by some other devices, like camera or typer, or probably like a huge list of different things that previously were actual things, and there were like entire
tape recorder,
like gazillions of things that previously entire companies were built, that was their business niche. Then a completely new innovation came in, and just it turned out that it is actually doing that for free. So now we have big tech companies, and then AI comes in, and something tells me at some point, many of these services that are currently done by big tech will be done for free. And that is a massive destruction of capital. So that's tech. Another thing, if you look at it, is real estate, which is currently used. The main purpose of it is to provide shelter for labor providers. But if labor is not needed, what does it tell us about the value of the capital that is used to support labor? Open question.
Well, maybe people will live not necessarily in cities, or they'll live in more distributed locations because they don't have to travel, they don't have to work, they don't have to provide that labor. But at the same time, how do they afford that? How does that work? Yeah, it's complicated.
One of the things to look at it is actually, so we, first of all, pretty clear that offices are no longer needed. You already see it in office prices. The buildings are being sold, office buildings across the world, they sold like at 50% discount everywhere. It's like,
I had a professor that I know visited San Francisco, and the downtown, all the offices are being sold and they're vacant and they'd be for rent everywhere. And he said, I thought the U.S. economy was doing well, and it is, but
so that's the first thing. And then you think about this way. So we're going to have mass unemployment very soon. It's pretty certain. I do not see ways of avoiding that. We're going to have lots of people unable to cover their mortgages, and we will have empty office buildings in CBDs. So what do you think we're going to have next?
CBD is Australian for central business districts.
Yeah, it's basically downtown. So it's like the entire world is going to turn into Detroit, because that's Detroit kind of a symbol of how that happened in one specific city. But basically the same thing is going to happen. So a very large number of unemployed people and very large open empty spaces of office buildings. What I'm saying is that offices, I think it's not rocket science, it's pretty clear, going to be converted into affordable housing across the world. And that's, just imagine how that's going to change entire dynamic landscape in cities, because currently the center of the city is almost everywhere still considered prestigious, and lots of capital is actually based on that fact that all these areas are one way or another supporting labor providers. And here we go, labor is not needed, and this entire dynamic changes completely. Just imagine the amount of capital going to be raised in the process. And again, it's all about AI. So that's how intelligence changes this entire mix between capital and labor.
So you have labor essentially disappearing, or large parts of it disappearing because it gets automated, which makes sense. And then you have a lot of sources of capital where you use to essentially enable people to do their work effectively. And so those portions of capital kind of go to zero in terms of their worth.
Yep.
And then, so you had some amount of capital left, but that's just the capital that's related to like creating computers and running data centers.
And energy, yep.
So then you have tons of intelligence that is doing what labor used to do and is either doesn't need capital to operate, or is using capital just to like say, hey, I'll give you some CPU in the future if you do this for me, kind of thing. So that's what cryptocurrencies would be doing, I guess. So that sounds kind of like a hyper deflation. So how would this affect money or inflation or deflation or whatever, right? You have capital essentially kind of shrinking or disappearing, and people maybe not using it or not having access to it anymore. What happens?
Here's an interesting, I think it's a multi-dimensional thing on its own. The concept of inflation is complex. I had a few videos about it, actually. You can check on the scripture.
Let's link one over here.
So here's the thing about inflation. And again, I'm going to talk about one specific force. It doesn't mean that it's the only force. It's a complex thing, but I think this is a major force. It just so happened that if you look at the revenue of almost every big Western government, let's call the U.S. government, for example, you will find, and you look at the budget, and more specifically at the revenue part of the budget, you will find a very interesting thing, is that the vast majority of the government revenue is coming from taxing labor. In case of U.S., it's about 80%, more than 80% of the government revenue is coming from taxing labor.
Is it like
people.
personal income taxes and stuff, or
Personal income taxes. So basically, pretty much whatever is coming from, I think, if a person works, he pays different taxes related on personal income, and that actually altogether contributes like 80% of the revenue of the government. As far as I recall, I may be wrong here, but I think the fraction of the corporate taxes in it is like 4% or something like this.
I mean, the U.S. corporate tax rate is so low.
It's not just armies and armies of accountants and lawyers who have just one purpose to optimize the corporate taxes. The point is, the most important thing is that the vast majority of the government revenue is coming from taxing individuals, labor. And now, as we learn, labor doesn't make sense anymore. Where exactly the revenue for the government will come from? And if you kind of research this very quickly, you will find out that pretty much there are no really alternatives to this. And the only one alternative that does exist is actually print money, because money technically is, it's like a tax on labor, but basically this is the only tool that governments in this environment will have.
They have to either like stop spending money, like
Which
just
is
cut all sorts,
real impossible, yeah.
or they have to print money.
Just print money, and that's pretty much it. You cannot tax labor, you cannot tax corporates. Where else? Well, you can tax maybe liquor or consumption. This is pretty much, as far as I recall, about 100 years ago, almost 80% of income was coming from, in the US, was coming from taxing liquor and tobacco. But something tells me this is not going to work this time. So just let's imagine that we are government, and so we begin to print money. So what happens then?
Runaway inflation.
Yes, and that's AI inflation, basically, if you think about it, because it's driven by AI, and it's almost inevitability is that well, again, inflation is a complex thing. There are multiple forces that are playing there, but this is it's like an elephant in the room, and that creates a question like, what's going to be the future of money? And it's not just U.S. It's everybody, all governments. Talking about the vertical structures, right? Yeah. This is just one another force of how AI eradicates the vertical structures. And the money is a part of this vertical structure. This is basically a part of this system. That's how it works. That's the whole, again, what this means is that the way how groups of people were, if we boil it down to what's important, the way how groups of people were self-organizing previously, and the money was a part how they self-organizing themselves. So that is not going to work anymore, because one of the reason why it's not going to work is because labor is changing its meaning, and because of labor, that's because of that, capital is changing its meaning. And then, if you think about it, what the government is really needed for? The governments are needed to organize people and move them to some, whatever the objective is, to build a pyramid or to do something, right?
To establish laws and regulations.
Yeah, but basically to organize people so they can do something productive. Like then to protect people, which means to create armies and well, it's another topic, but basically armies are also becoming very different. AI changes completely. You can use like a $1,000 drone to destroy a $10 billion aircraft carrier, as we see. So it's basically a reality. It's becoming a reality. So that part is also like conventional armies are not efficient way of protecting, of defense anymore. So labor, then armies, and then money. Crypto, so money is, as we have just seen, is not sustainable anymore, most likely, in the current form.
And you already have the decentralized alternative out there.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's actually crypto in so many ways more efficient than that, especially if we talk about transferring of resources between two AI models, which we established is going to be the main thing soon. So there's absolutely no way physical, like current money, fiat money, can be used for that purpose. Zero chance. And so that raises a question: this vertical structure, what it's needed for.
So where does that leave everybody else? Obviously I think it's fair to say there's going to be a high amount of variance in what is happening because there's like so many forces at play. What things change first, what things change later. And as you said, like the obvious thing is labor is going to be automated. So people are like, oh, let's just invest in land or something. And then it's like, well, land becomes devalued and money itself becomes super devalued because of hyperinflation. So, I guess you could invest in, you could try to put wealth towards like what is useful for intelligence, right? Like the infrastructure, the hardware, the energy, and so on. Or you could put things towards what is useful for your health or for your long-term survival during a probably chaotic period. I don't know. Are there any other conclusions that you've drawn from this, like personally? Or...
Yeah, you could buy Scriptbook.
Best investment ever.
Which is available next to actually this week when the video will be published. So it's already available. Just go and check it.
Learn Russian first.
No, it's that one is the English one. So this is
there's an English
version coming in. Basically, when this video is going to be published, it will be on Kickstarter. So you can already buy it. You can buy futures of the book.
Right. Let's transfer some labor through time here and obtain scripters labor as very well. But yeah, so I think you wanted to say something at the end about your Kickstarter, right? Like it's by the time this video comes out, Scripter will have a Kickstarter related to the books.
Yes. So basically, the book is available. There's going to be a link here. It's a Kickstarter campaign. We, as Wako mentioned, so the book is it's available in Russian right now, and it's going to be you can actually download it in the Kickstarter, just in case it so happens that you can speak Russian. But in the whole purpose of the Kickstarter is to translate it properly, not translate, but to edit the English version, so to make it professional, like as good as possible. And that will be, so the book itself will be available probably in 2 or 3 months after that. So yeah, just go to the Kickstarter, go to my website. It's the-scripter.com. And this is how you get into the Scripter universe.
Yeah, we'll link it down below as the first link in the video description will be to the Kickstarter.
How nicely we just ruin the entire universe, just saying this is not going to work, labor capital doesn't work, anything. So what are we gonna? What's the only currency? Like Scripter book, yes, reading.
What can you take into yourself, right? Like your health, your knowledge,
cybersecurity.
Prevent the AI models from destroying each other's infrastructure, and
no, but seriously, because this is one of the very few areas where humans still will be needed. Because from a security, it's like a fundamental need to have a human there. You cannot get rid of a human in this.
True, like it's very hard to trust automated tools when like you have to backdoor the compiler, the very lowest.
Yeah, you need somebody. If something goes wrong, you need somebody to kick their ass. And there's this. So,
burn the hard drive.
Yeah, but it's like a troublesome analogy, right? It's like the only purpose of the human will be so you have somebody to kind of punish it. So
we'll sit there on the restart button, waiting for man to press the restart button. Yeah.
It's sad.
Yes, as you can see, we're both two extremely optimistic humans about the future when it has AI in it.
Yeah.
But it was very, very cool to talk to an economist about some of these impacts on China, and then also on the whole world as we think about how AI will impact our future. And I had an even better story now to tell about the 3 pillars of economics.
The message that I have is that like those dedicated viewers who watched until the end,
yes.
Use this chance. You have no idea how hard it is to promote a video in this crazy environment of AI, blogging, YouTubing about AI. Because the harsh reality that we're facing is that it is very hard to find a person on YouTube who actually knows what he's talking about when he talks about AI. And Dr. Wako right here is one of the very few who is actually knows what he's talking about. We shouldn't take it for granted. which means that you know where the like button is, right? So just use your time wisely. And while you, by the way, while you may asking like, hey, what's my strategy of securing a future in the AI era? This is your strategy because it's all being recorded. All likes are recorded. It's like in the future, AI, the future intelligence is like, all right, I think this guy has actually done something good. He liked Dr. Walker's video. So this is the best investment. Let's secure your future in the era of AI.
So I didn't pay him to say that, and I think this is the best. See, like YouTubers always feel a little awkward to promote their own videos. Click like and subscribe, whatever. But when you have another YouTuber on, they can do the best possible messaging there. So
yeah, we maybe sometimes overplay it a bit, but well, you know what to do, basically, right? Yeah, so do it. Use your fingers wisely.
Prepare for the future with no money. All you can do is like.
All what matters is likes. Likes. Just like it. Like, yeah. Be careful what you like. But this is the right. It's probably too much already, right? Yeah.
But yeah, so thank you very much, Scripter, for coming and setting up this amazing lighting and everything. And thanks to everybody for watching. I think if you like this video, the most related one is this previous one I made about the GDP of the world going from 3% to 30%, potentially as a result of AI. Our actual economist here thinks this is kind of nonsense, but I found a paper that said it, so whatever.
No, like you need to promote nonsense. That's how you get likes. Talking about likes, don't forget. But yeah, so 30%, it's like
30%. Yeah, you should read the paper. Anyway, or watch the video better yet. So thank you very much for coming, and see you next time. Bye.